Hi, my name is Anne. In this video, I'm going to finish the Irish chain quilt by putting binding on it. I'm going to use a machine binding method that's going to use 2-inch strips pressed in half, and I'm going to attach it to the back first, pull it around to the front, and finish it there. And I'll be giving you close-up demonstrations on how to, as you're sewing the back, how I mitered the corners there and how to join the ends to make a nice clean mitered join on the back. And then after you pull it around to the front, I'll be showing you how to make nice mitered corners on the front as you go. And so then after the quilt is all bound, I'm going to take it outside and hang it in the cedar trees and take photographs. That's how I take photos of my quilts. And then I'm going to throw it through the wash and show you what it looks like after it's washed. So stick around for all of that, and thank you for being here. And if you enjoy this video, please subscribe. Here is the Jardin Noir. It's the same fabric as in the squares, and I didn't think I was gonna like this one, but actually kind of do. It's interesting and matchy and yeah, I like this. Okay, let's look at the others. I've crossed this off the list and brought it back to the list a couple times, but I don't know, this stuff, if I'm at a certain distance, it kind of makes me dizzy, but I love a stripe binding. So let me put it on there and see what it looks like. I kind of like this. In smaller doses, it doesn't make me dizzy. So let's look at plain black. This black matches the Jardin Noir black and the black in this Lori Holt fabric just fine. It's more just of a stopping border for the edge of the quilt rather than a feature. This is going to be difficult because there's a case for each of these three. So I think what I'm going to do is load it up on my computer so I can see it on a big screen and try to make a choice that way. Okay, let's see. So Jardin Noir wins it for the bind. And yeah, the black was just underwhelming and almost out of place, oddly, to me. And the stripes, I'm probably going to regret not picking them tomorrow. I could go either way. What I decided I wanted to do was a little thinner binding rather than 2.5 inch. Cutting the strips at 2.5 inch, I decided to go for 2 inch. And I'm still gonna, fold it in half and iron it like that. But I just wanted to make sure that when I attached it to the back, I could at least have a 1/4 inch seam and pull it around to the front. And when I stitch right along the edge there, it's gonna miss the binding in the back because I want to use black on top and white on the bottom. I want to know I'm going to miss the black with that white thread. And the white thread will disappear in this print, honestly. So I ran a little test to make sure, and it worked fine. So that's what I'm going to do, cut this into 2-inch strips. The amount of fabric I'm going to need is, this quilt is 70 inches tall and 58 inches wide. So let's call it 60 inches wide to make it easy. 60 inches plus 60 inches is 120 inches. And then 70 plus 70 is 140. So 140 plus 120 is 260. I'm going to add 20 inches to make up for corners and ends and miters and all that. So we'll call it 280. 280 divided by 40 inches is how many strips we need. So let's go 28 divided by 4 to make it easier. 4 times 7 is 28. That's just right. So we need 7 strips. I already have one So I'm going to cut 6 more using this Stripology ruler, and let me clear this off and do that. All right, I've got this lined up roughly on the 5-inch mark. Let's start at the 6-inch mark. I need to cut 12 inches, a little more, so 6 plus 12 is 18. So we're going to go over here and do 18 and a half. Okay, that should be enough. All right, Stripology. Gonna fold this one more time. So we need 6 2-inch strips. So I'm going to start this at 0 and make sure the ends of this ruler go off the edge. Make sure I'm catching all the layers. I know one's shorter. Okay. Starting at 0, lining this fold up with this white line on this ruler, and make sure that we're going to hit 12, plenty to spare. So, nice thing about this ruler, it's big enough, it really sits down solid. It just doesn't move, which I enjoy a lot. All right, so that was at 0 inches, so that's 2, 4, right on. We'll do something with that. And now I'm going to trim this down, and I checked, and the baseline I did is 5 3/4 inches exactly from the outside edge of this border all the way around, and I measured the 2 ends compared to each other, and it's close enough. So I'm going to trim this 1/8 of an inch to the outside of my baseline so that I can hide that in the binding. So So I take the 2 strip ends and put them right sides together, making sure that the selvages are hanging well to the outside. And then I turn the whole thing 45 degrees, and the needle will go right into that intersection at the top. I'll put a couple stitches in to get it going, and then I'll lift the foot so that I can sort of swing that unit around until I see that the bottom crossing is lining up with that tape on my machine. That red line in the middle is lined up with my needle, so it makes it so much easier to stitch a straight line like that without having to mark it or anything. And so then I just grab the end of the one I just attached, and I swing that around and add the next one right sides together in the same fashion. And I just keep going like that, chain piecing until all the strips are connected. Once I've got those all chained together, I'll take a pair of snips and cut those threads in between, and just check and make sure that the miters are all lining up properly and I didn't get the selvages in there. Then I'll take scissors and cut off those selvages, cut 1/4 inch away from the seam, and make sure there's no dog ears. And then it's time to press. So I'm going to press this in half, and this is pretty much your standard press in half binding routine. Trying to go slow because, again, I can't see very well if the black is matching up. I'm going to stop and press these open. Alright, we're going to start on the back. I should have tested it to make sure that none of the seams land in the corners, but I just roll the dice, right? Okay, I'm going to leave a large tail on there, raw edges of the binding to raw edges of the quilt. So what I'm shooting for is at the edge of my foot, because I've done this and picked it out a couple times now, so I think I got a pretty good feel. Alright, so I'm going to go to the corner and sew off and take a peek at how we're doing on the other side for the fold over. So, you guys have probably all seen this a million times, but... And so as we come up to the corner on the first side of the quilt, what I do is I stop a 1/4 inch from this corner. You can mark it or you can just eyeball it. I usually just eyeball it. All right, and so once you've arrived, you just lift your foot with your needle down. You turn the quilt and you're going to stitch at a 45-degree angle right off the edge where that corner is. Then lift that edge up, straight up, so that it's nice and parallel with the edge of the next side that you're going to go down. And stick your finger in there, and then I just kind of pinch it down with my finger. The idea is to get this fold parallel with the side you just sewed, and I like to go ahead and push it out and give it an extra thread or two out there to make up for the thickness of the quilt when you wrap it around to the front. So then, with your mitered corner in place, I like to backstitch when I come back on. I get to have alcohol when it's binding time. All right, here we are with our two ends. And this, I find, is the best perspective for me to figure out how to join these ends. This has always been tricky for me, and until I saw Corey Yoder's video, which I'll link down in the description, where she did it from this perspective and just demonstrated it so well, I get it now. So I'm hoping I can help someone do the same. So this is your end, and this is your beginning. And what I like to do is just roughly find the middle between one end and the next and trim one of your strips. How about this one? Right about there, I think. Then take the piece that you just trimmed off, and the idea is you want to overlap these two strips. You don't want them just to meet, but you want one to overlap by the width of your binding. So we just cut off the binding and here's the width of it. So what I do is just take this piece, line it up with the edge of that first, the ending there that we trimmed, and take the other end over the top. And you're not going to want to exactly cut it right at 2 inches. You're going to want to come in a little bit, 1/16 or an 1/8, just to make sure that there's not extra slack when you go to join those ends. So I'm coming in about an 1/8. If I flatten this all out, it's about an 1/8. And so now for this part, the fun part, with your ending, pick it up and put it up here, face up. With your beginning, take it and put it face down on top, just like we joined the binding pieces together. And line those up. And again, just like we did in the binding, you're going to stitch from this corner to this corner. And I like to just put a pin as if it was the stitch line so that I can audition and make sure that I didn't twist anything the wrong direction. And this actually is right. You would see a big twist in here if it wasn't. So I'm going to take it to the machine like this. So coming back from getting these ends lined up properly, what you're going to want to do is make sure that the pressure is off of these ends that you're going to stitch. This is just a demo piece that's not causing a problem, but the whole weight of a quilt can get to be a bit much sometimes. So sometimes it helps to put a couple clips here just to give yourself some space, and so nothing's tugging on this. So I'm going to remove that reference pin and going to line this up more exactly. Get my needle in there and make a couple stitches. And then I can kind of pivot the bottom around here. I'm lining it up with my red line that's in line with my needle, but you can draw a line on it if that helps, whatever. And so I'm going to go ahead and back stitch. And I'm just watching the corner, keeping it in line with that red line. And so that looks great. Not too much extra fabric or anything in there. I'm just gonna trim the extra off at a 1/4 inch seam. And then I will finger press this open. And finish stitching the last piece of the back of the quilt. Okay, now I just finished sewing this, and the hard part is actually done. The rest is cake, as the young people say. So when the quilt is bound on the back, I like to bring it here to the ironing board, and I like to make sure that the seams are fully opened. I just try to really flatten it. Make sure I have as much fabric as possible to pull around to the front, especially with this 2-inch binding, because it's really cutting it close, actually. Okay, so it's all nice and pressed outward, so I'm going to take it to the machine and pull it to the other side and go around and finish this quilt. I'll see you at the machine. Okay, well, we're here to finish the binding, and I got black thread on top, white in the bobbin, which is what I want because the stitch line, God willing, is going to come out just on the other side of the binding on the back. So I will be watching that very closely at first. And yeah, we're almost done. And when this quilt is done, I'm going to take it out in on the property. It's my neighbor's property. It's actually a very dear friend of mine who bought next to me. She hasn't built on it, but it's thickly wooded. So I use a tension pole between two cedar trees and take my quilt pictures out there. Once that's done, I will throw it in the wash and wash it, and I'll show it to you guys after it's washed. I always want to see quilts after they're washed when I watch YouTube videos, and almost never do I get to, so I'm going to share. It's the thing. You have to go a little ways before you can look at anything with this big walking foot. That looks good. Oh, wow. Plenty of room. Okay. So as I approach the next corner, I'll stop short of it, give myself a bit of room there, and I will fold the binding up from the next side and kind of open up the end and push that out so there's a bit of a 45-degree angle there. And then I'll pull it back over so that it meets in a nice little mitered corner here. And then I'll just hold it down with something like you see me doing here. And I like to give it a little back stitch. All right, then lift the foot, pivot, and continue down the next side. And so here's your mitered corners on the front side of the quilt. And here's what it looks like on the back. Here's our stitch line from sewing the binding to the front. Yep, that's how I do it. So I usually put about 3 color catchers. It depends on the quilt. I'm not worried about this one running because I've made quilts with all 3 of these fabrics before and I've never had a problem. But you know, better safe than sorry.